Here we go. Can It Happen Again? Chronicles of the Holocaust. Edited by Roselle K. Chartook and Jack Spencer. In 1943, Eli Wiesel was a boy living in the village of Sziget in a mountainous region in Hungary. The war had barely touched this remote settlement. The radio was their sole source of information about the fighting. In his novel, Night, Wessel relates how one day all non Hungarians were expelled from the town. His beloved teacher, Moshe the Bedel, was among those rounded up and deported. Listen to me, Eli Wessel. Several days passed, several weeks, several months. Life had returned to normal. A wind of calmness and reassurance blew through our houses. The traders were doing good business. The students lived buried in their books, and the children played in the streets. One day, as I was going into the synagogue, I saw sitting on the bench near the door Moshe the beadle. He told his story and that of his companions. The train full of deportees had crossed the Hungarian frontier and on Polish territory had been taken in charge by the Gestapo. There it had stopped. The Jews had to get out and climb into lorries. The lorries drove toward a forest. The Jews were made to get out. They were made to dig huge graves, and when they had finished their work, the Gestapo began theirs. Without passion, without haste, they slaughtered their prisoners. Each one had to go up to the hole, present his neck. Babies were thrown. Babies were thrown into the air, and the machine gunners used them as targets. This was in the forest of Galicia, near Colome. How had Moshe the beadle escaped? Miraculously, he was wounded in the leg and taken for dead. Through long days and nights, he went from one Jewish house to another, telling the story of Melka, the young girl who had taken 3 days to die, and of Tobias, the tailor, who had begged to be killed before his sons. Moshe had changed. There was no longer any joy in his eyes. He no longer sang. He no longer talked to me of God or the Kabbalah, but only of what he had seen. People refused not only to believe his stories, but even to listen to them. He's just trying to make us pity him. What an imagination he has, they said, or even, poor fellow, he's gone mad. And as for Moshe, he wept. Jews, listen to me. It's all I ask of you. I don't want money or pity. Only listen to me. He would cry between prayers at dusk and the evening prayers. I did not believe him myself. I would often sit with him in the evening after the services, listening to his stories and trying my hardest to understand his grief. I felt only pity for him. They take me for a madman, he would whisper, and tears like drops of wax flowed from his eyes. Once I asked him this question: why are you so anxious that people should believe what you say? In your place, I shouldn't care whether they believe me or not. He closed his eyes as though to escape. You don't understand, he said in despair. You can't understand. I have been saved miraculously. I managed to get back here. Where did I get the strength from? I wanted to come back to Sziget to tell you the story of my death, so that you could prepare yourselves while there was still time to live. I don't attach any importance to my life anymore. I'm alone. No, I wanted to come back and to warn you and see how it is. No one will listen to me. That was toward the end of 1942. Afterward, life returned to normal. The London radio, which we listened to every evening, gave us heartening news: the daily bombardment of Germany, Stalingrad, preparation for the Second Front, and we, the Jews of Sziget, were waiting for better days, which would not be long in coming now. I continued to devote myself to my studies, by day, the Talmud, at night, the Kabbalah. My father was occupied with his business and the doings of the community. My grandfather had come to celebrate the new year with us, so that he could attend the services of the famous Rabbi of Borsch. My mother began to think that it was high time to find a suitable young man for Hilda. Thus, the year 1943 passed away. Spring 1944, good news from the Russian front, no doubt could remain now of Germany's defeat. It was only a question of time, of months or weeks perhaps. The trees were in blossom. This was a year like any other, with its springtime, its betrothals, its weddings and births. People said the Russian army's making gigantic strides forward. Hitler won't be able to do us any harm, even if he wants to. Yes, we even doubted that he wanted to exterminate us. Was he going to wipe out a whole people? Could he exterminate a population scattered through so many countries, so many millions? What methods could he use? And in the middle of the 20th century? Besides, people were interested in everything, in strategy, in diplomacy, in politics, in Zionism, but not in their own fate. Even Moshe the Bedouin was silent. He was weary of speaking. He wandered in the synagogue or in the streets with his eyes down, his back bent, avoiding people's eyes. At that time, it was still possible to obtain immigration permits for Palestine. I had asked my father to sell out, liquidate his business, and leave. I'm too old, my son, he replied. I'm too old to start a new life. I'm too old to start from scratch again in a country so far away. The Budapest radio announced that the fascist party had come into power. Horthy had been forced to ask one of the leaders of the Nihilist party to form a new government. Still, this was not enough to worry us. Of course, we had heard about the fascists, but they were still just an abstraction to us. This was only a change in the administration. The following day, there were more disturbing news. With government permission, German troops had entered Hungarian territory. Here and there, anxiety was aroused. One of our friends, Berkowitz, who had just returned from the capital, told us the Jews in Budapest are living in an atmosphere of fear and terror. There are anti Semitic incidents every day in the streets, in the trains. The fascists are attacking Jewish shops and synagogues. The situation is getting very serious. This news spread like wildfire through Sayet. Soon it was on everyone's lips, but not for long. Optimism soon revived. The Germans won't get as far as this. They'll stay in Budapest. There are strategic and political reasons. Before 3 days had passed, German army cars had appeared in our streets. Anguish, German soldiers with their steel helmets and their emblem, and the death's head. However, our first impression of the Germans were most reassuring. The officers were billeted in private houses, even in the homes of Jews. Their attitude toward their host was distant but polite. They never demanded the impossible, made no unpleasant comments, and even smiled occasionally at the mistress of the house. One German officer lived in the house opposite ours. He had a room with the Kahn family. They said he was a charming man, calm, likable, polite, and sympathetic. 3 days after he moved in, he brought Madame Kahn a box of chocolates. The optimist rejoiced. Well, there you are, you see. What did we tell you? You wouldn't believe us. There they are, your Germans. What do you think of them? Where is their famous cruelty? The Germans were already in the town. The fascists were already in power. The verdict had already been pronounced, yet the Jews of Sayhat continued to smile. The largest single group of people killed in the Nazis were 6 million European Jews. This number represented 1/3 of the entire Jewish population of the world at that time. In addition to the 6 million Jews, the Nazis destroyed an equal number of non-Jews of various nationalities during the course of the war. This chart is reprinted from Keeping Posted. And then it's got like a list. I don't know if you want me to go ahead and well, I guess I can. It ain't going to hurt nothing. Estimates of Jewish losses, 1939 to 45. Country, Poland. Estimated pre-final solution population, 3,300,000. Estimated Jewish population annihilated. Wow. 3 million, 90%. Baltic countries, 250,000. Estimated Jewish population annihilated, 228,000%, 90. Germany, Austria, 240,000. Estimated Jewish population annihilated, 210,000%, 90. Bohemia, Moravia, 90,000. Estimated population annihilated 80,000, 89%. Slovakia, 90,000. Annihilated 75,000, 83%. Greece, 70,000. Annihilated 54,000, 77%. The Netherlands, 140,000. Annihilated 105,000, 75%. Hungary, 650,000, 450 annihilated, 70%. SSR, White Russian, 375,000. Jewish annihilated, 245,000, 65%. Okay, so here's the wow, man, Belgium, 43,000. Jewish population annihilated 26,000, percentage 60. Romania, 600,000. Jewish population annihilated 300,000, percentage 50. Norway, 350,000. Jewish population, 90,000 annihilated, 26%. Bulgaria, 64,000. Jewish population annihilated 14,000, 22%. Italy, 40,000. Jewish population annihilated 8,000, 20%. Luxembourg, 5,000. Jewish annihilation 1,000, 20%. Russian RSFSR. The German did not occupy all the territories of this republic, it says. 975,000. Jewish annihilated 107,000, 11%. Denmark, 8,000. And there's, I guess, none. Finland, 2,000, none. Total, 8,861,800. The Jewish population annihilated 5,933,900. Let's see, how do you word that? 5,933,900. 67%. The nature of man. We now turn our attention away from the history of the Holocaust and begin to seek answers to the questions that arise inescapably from the foregoing readings. How could this immense tragedy have happened? How could civilized, religious, educated Germans commit acts of such unspeakable bestiality? Were the Nazis unique, or could anyone, we ourselves perhaps, be capable of the same? The 5 readings that follow present different perspectives on the nature of man by well-known philosophers and scientists from the 15th century to the present. Each makes reasonably clear its author's belief about whether people are fundamentally good or bad. Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469 to 1527, was an Italian statesman and writer who is regarded as the first political philosopher of modern times. Among his writings are The Prince and The Art of War. Really? I have that, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere. He believed in government by the people, but felt that the Italians of his day were unfit to rule themselves. He was concerned with the use and abuse of power. The Prince, Niccolò Machiavelli. This then gives rise to the question whether it be better to be beloved than feared, or to be feared than beloved. It will naturally be answered that it would be desirable to be both the one and the other. But as it is difficult to be both at the same time, it is much more safe to be feared than to be loved when you have to choose between the two. For it may be said of men in general that they are ungrateful and fickle, dissemblers, avoiders of danger, and greedy of gain. So long as you shower benefits upon them, they are all yours. They offer you their blood, their substance, their lives, their children, provided the necessity for it is far off. But when it is near at hand, then they revolt. And the prince who relies upon their words without having otherwise provided for his security is ruined. For friendships that are won by rewards and not by greatness and nobility of soul, although deserved, yet are not real and cannot be depended upon in time of adversity. Besides, men have less hesitation in offending one who makes himself beloved than one who makes himself feared. For love holds by a bond of obligation, which, as mankind is bad, is broken on every occasion, whenever it is for the interest of the obliged party to break it. But fear holds by the apprehension of punishment, which never leaves men. It being necessary, then, for a prince to know well how to employ the nature of the beast, he should be able to assume both that of the fox and that of the lion. For while the latter cannot escape the traps laid for him, the former cannot defend himself against the wolves. A prince should be a fox to know the traps and snares, and a lion to be able to frighten the wolves, for those who simply hold to the nature of the lion do not understand their business. A sagacious prince then cannot and should not fulfill his pledges when their observance is contrary to his interest, and when the causes that induce him to pledge his faith no longer exist. If men were all good, then indeed this precept would be bad. But as men are naturally bad and will not observe their faith towards you, you must in the same way not observe yours to them. And no prince ever yet lacked legitimate reasons with which to color his want of good faith. Innumerable modern examples could be given of this, and it could easily be shown how many treaties of peace and how many engagements have been made null and void by the faithlessness of princes, and he who has best known how to play the fox has ever been the most successful. Wow, that's crazy. Thomas Hobbes, 1588 to 1679, was an English political philosopher whose critical and negative perceptions of man were often unpopular. In his famous work Leviathan, he was so critical of his government that his work was condemned by the British House of Commons in 1666 and censored. He also wrote The Elements of Law and Natural and Political. Man is evil and warlike, Thomas Hobbes. From this equality of ability arises equality of hope in the attaining of our ends. And therefore, if any two men desire the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies, and in the way to their end, which is principally their own conversation, and sometimes their declaration only, endeavor to destroy or subdue one another. And from hence it comes to pass that where an invader who has no more to fear than another man's single power, if one plant, sow, build, or possess a convenient seat, others may probably be expected to come prepared with forces united to dispossess and deprive him not only of the fruit of his labor, but also of his life or liberty. And the invader again is in the like danger of another. And from this difference of one another, there is no way for any man to secure himself so reasonable as anticipation, that is, by force or wiles to master the person of all men he can, so long till he see no other power great enough to endanger him, and this is no more than his own conversation requires, and is generally allowed. Also, because there be some that take pleasure in contemplating their own power in the acts of conquest, which they pursue farther than their security requires. If others that otherwise would be glad to be at ease within modest bounds should not be invasion increase their power, they would not be able long time by standing only on their defense to subsist. And by consequence, such argumentation of dominion over men being necessary to a man's conversation, it ought to be allowed him. Again, men have no pleasure, but on the contrary, to deal to a great. Now, see, I'm saying that wrong. Again, men have no pleasure, but on the contrary, a great deal of grief in keeping company where there is no power able to overawe them all. For every man looks that his companion should value him at the same rate he sets upon himself, and upon all signs of contempt or undervaluing naturally endeavors, as far as he dares, which among them that have no common power to keep them in quiet is far enough to make them destroy each other, to extort a greater value from his contemners by damage, and from others by the example. So that in the nature of man we find three principal causes of quarrel. First, competition. Secondly, diffidence. Thirdly, glory. The first makes men invade for gain, the second for safety, and the third for reputation. The first use violence to make themselves masters of other men's persons, wives, children, and cattle. The second to defend them. The third for trifles, as a word, a smile, a different opinion, and any other sign of undervalue, either direct in their persons or by reflection in their kindred, their friends, their nation, their profession, or their name. Hereby it is manifest that, during the time men live without a common power to keep them all in awe, they are in that condition which is called war, and such a war as is of every man against every man. Wow, that is insane, you guys. John Locke, 1632 to 1704, was an English philosopher who believed in civil liberty, religious tolerance, the power of reason, and the value of experience. His work include essay concerning human understanding, two treatises on civil government, an essay on the law of nature. Man is rational, John Locke. The state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges everyone, and reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, for liberty, or possessions. Men living together according to reason without a common superior on earth, with authority to judge between them, are properly in the state of nature. Robert Ardrey, 1908 to 1980. Wow, he lived to be very old. Was a lecturer and well, I guess that's not super old, is it? It's like 72 years. That's it. Okay. Was a lecturer in the natural sciences and an anthropology and on anthropology. He was also a playwright. In 1955, he began his African travels and studied and wrote African Genesis, 1961, a personal investigation into the animal origins and nature of man. Man is innately aggressive, Robert Ardrey. In the past 30 years, a revolution has been taking place in the natural sciences. It is a revolution in our understanding of the animal behavior and our link to the animal world. In sum, therefore, the revolution concerns that most absorbing of human entertainments, man's understanding of man. Yet not even science as a whole is aware of the philosophical reprisal which must proceed from its specialist doings. Assumptions concerning the nature of man, today unquestioned by education, by psychiatry, by politics, by art, or even by science itself, are being eroded by the tiny streams set loose from obscure scientific springs. And few of us, scientists or laymen, know that the contemporary revolution in the natural sciences has proceeded thus far in almost total silence must not be regarded as too great a wonder. Other and noisier revolutions have overwhelmed our unquiet times. As compared with the fortunes of the totalitarian state of nuclear physics, of antibiotics, or the long playing record, the fortunes of the paleontologist may seem remote from our daily life. And the work of the revolution has been accomplished by such extreme specialists that it has been recorded only in such inaccessible pages as those of the American Journal of Anthropology or the Biological Symposia. Some heralds gain few hearers in the modern marketplace. Still more important than the obscurity or specialization of the revolution has been its suddenness. When in 1930 I emerged from a respectable American university as a respectably well educated young man, no hint had reached me that private property was other than a human institution evolved by the human brain. If I and my young contemporaries throughout the following years wasted much of our fire on social propositions involving the abolition, no, about, abolition, abolition of private ownership, then we did so in perfect faith that such a course would free mankind of many a frustration. No part of the curriculum of our psychology, sociology, or anthropology departments had presented us with the information that territoriality, the drive to gain, maintain, and defend the exclusive right to a piece of property is an animal instinct approximately as ancient and as powerful as sex. The role of territory in general animal behavior lies today beyond scientific controversy. Then it was unknown. We of the class of 1930 had to emerge into a world of tumultuous evaluation without benefit of this most salient observation. Similarly, we could not know as we amused ourselves with the bemused ourselves with the attractions of the classless state that hierarchy is an institution among all social animals, and the drive to dominate one's fellows are instinct 3 or 400 million years old. We, the appropriate, no, no. We, the approximate class of 1930 today, furnish trusted and vital leadership to the world thought, world politics, world society, and to whatever may exist of world hope. But we do not know that the human drive to acquire possession is the simple expression of an animal instinct many hundreds of times older than the human race itself. We do not know that the roots of nationalism are dug firmly into the social territoriality of almost every species in our related primate family. We do not know that the status seekers are responding to animal instincts equally characteristic of baboons, jackdaws, rock cod, and men. Well, you know what? If he wants to be a pig and he wants to be a monkey and he wants to be a fish, go for it. But I'm not. I'm created in the image and the likeness of God. Praise you, Jesus. These people are just stupid. All right, let's see. Oh, let's see. Responsible though we may be for the fate of summit conferences, disarmament agreements, juvenile delinquents, and new African states, we do not know that the first man was an armed killer or that evolutionary survival from his mutant instinct depended upon the use, the development, and the contest of weapons. We do not know these things since they are conclusions to be drawn from the contemporary revolution in the natural sciences. We should know, however, that acquired characteristics cannot be inherited, and that within a species every member is born in the essential image of the first of its kind. No child of ours born in the middle 20th century can differ at birth in significant measure from the earliest of Homo sapiens. No instinct, whether psychological or culture, that constituted a part of the original human bundle can ever in the history of the species be permanently suppressed or abandoned. I don't know about all that. B.F. Skinner, 1904 to 1990, was a professor of psychology at Harvard and a researcher who won several awards for his contributions to the area of human behavior. He is the author of Walden 2, Science and Human Behavior, Verbal Behavior, and Beyond Freedom and Dignity. Man is a product of his environment. B.F. Skinner. Question. Suppose that people who read your book and take its message seriously realize that they are controlled. Will they lose their feelings of freedom? Skinner. I don't know. I certainly believe that my own behavior is entirely a function of three things: my genetic endowment, my past history as an individual, my family, my religious experience, my government, my schooling, the physical environment in which I have lived, and so on. In the present situation, I am absolutely sure that is all there is to the determination of what I'm going to do at this very moment, but I don't feel discouraged or unhappy about it at all. Question. You don't feel like a puppet? Skinner. I don't feel the least bit like a puppet. Operant conditioning is not pulling strings to make a person dance. It is arranging a world in which a person does things that affect that world, which in turn affects him. Question. When you come into the classroom and make children want to come to school, would you be controlling their behavior? Skinner. That's right. A girl who teaches in Kentucky, sixth grade, told me of a good example. Her students were not doing their homework, and they would not sit down and study. They ran around the room and talked a great deal. She decided to try some operant conditioning. Every Friday afternoon, she held a lottery, and the child whose name was drawn out of a jar got a prize. Every Monday morning, she would put the week's prize on the wall. One week, it was a Halloween costume. Another week, a transistor radio. Whenever a pupil brought in his homework, he could could write his name on a ticket and drop it in the jar. Whenever he finished an assignment in class, he could do the same. The system changed the girl's life as a teacher completely. Her pupils did all their homework. They sat quietly and listened to her because something she said might be just the thing they could use to get another ticket with their name in the jar. That's very ingenuitive. That was good. Question. A number of your attackers charge that behavior modification is being used in China today, and they are horrified at the very thought that we might apply it that way in this country. Skinner. Yes, it is said that the word fascism surfaces frequently in discussions of my book. The critics are usually good enough to say that I am not a fascist, but that I give aid and comfort to fascism. But every fascist state I've heard of uses aversive control. Its citizens behave as the government dictates because they are afraid not to do so. I've spent my life looking for alternatives to punitive control and arguing in their favor. I oppose standard totalitarian techniques, and I want people to feel free and enjoy what they're doing. But it may be true that I give aid and comfort to those who want to make any way of life more effective. What worries me is that in some curious way, the struggle for freedom and dignity has made it impossible for us to take advantage of what we're discovering about human behavior. If that proves to be the case, there has been a lethal mutation in our culture that may bring it to an end. A fascist way of life might then gain an advantage, but I'm doing what I can to prevent it. Crazy. All right. Next time we will pick up in part 2, brothers and sisters. Part 2. All right. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful Sabbath day. I think this whole gal is going to take a nap. Oh, so keep your eyes on Jesus and your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. That's so important, you guys. So very important. And let us embed the Word of God in the tablets of our hearts so we will not sin against God or be deceived. I love you all. Bye-bye.